Hey, welcome to the Backyard Professor live Sunday night. What is the date today? June 11th, 2023. I have the legendary Dan Vogel with me tonight, and we are going to talk about his book. What are you doing, Vogel? I'm trying to start this program, dude.
I forgot to mute my other computer.
It's all right. No problem. Let's get this show on the road. We have some fantastic information to share with you guys. You know, some of our people in chat are being very irreverent. Hello, Dan Vogel. How you doing tonight?
All right. We got like 51 people here already.
Hot dog. That's because you are the legend of Mormon history, and we have a very important new book to talk about. And we've got some gorgeous slides ready for you that Dan has so lovingly put together. And these are some of the nicest slides I have seen. So I'm very, very excited about this. Let's say hi to everybody. Mark Crispin. Yeah, baby. I've got the legend, Dan Vogel, on the screen. Radio Free Mormon. Yes, Dan the man. Doug Vincent, Loshram 32, Isabel Dobson, Booker, Preston, Most, see ya. Good to see ya. Peter Higgs, good morning, Peter. He's all the way down under, so he's way dedicated. He's coming all the way from across the other side of the world to us. Daisy B, Don Smith, good to see you. Lorena Cornella, hello, lovely. Doug Vincent, I've said hi to you already. JC Splunky Doink Hall, good to see you, my friend. JC, I said JC. Rebecca Biblioteca, her and I have been talking all afternoon about my new caricatures that I'm doing. By the way, just so that you guys know, we are, thanks to the influence of so many of you, someone found out that I do caricatures and I draw a little bit, not much, but kind of. And so they're asking me to do an Exmo Superheroes poster. And I have been drawing like a bat out of heck for the last week. I've got a few of them done as far as the portrait caricatures. And I'm going to put us on, thanks to RFM, we're going to do the Avengers theme. Avengers Assemble. And once I get this done here in a few months, I will be putting it out there for all of you to purchase. We're going to put it out somehow, some way, but I don't know how I'm going to do this. It's an enormous undertaking, but I'm not going to tell you who the characters are going to be yet. Some of you know, some of you don't. But so if any of you in my audience know of any Exmos, yes, I've already got Dan Vogel chosen for a very spectacular Avenger. I'm going to be one of them. Radio Free Mormon, all of them. I have Doug Vincent's going to be involved, and so if you can think of anyone, I don't want to leave anyone out, but I think there's only so much limited room. I just finished Sandra Tanner's caricature today. Some of you have gotten that as a review. It's going to be fun. It's going to be epic. I'm going to try my golly gosh darndest to do a good Exmos superhero poster. So if you have anybody or any ideas, please let me know. I hope I don't leave people out, although I'm going to, because there's hundreds of us and I don't have space on the, maybe I'll do 2 posters or 3 posters. Who knows? So anyway, that's what's up. And looks like we are ready to go, Dan. Your new book, Charisma Under Pressure. Your title is superb because it matches it. For those of you who have not got this book yet, along with John Dehlin of Mormon Stories, he is saying that we want, through the book review with Rebecca Biblioteca, right, Rebecca? Yes, we're advertising your book club on the Mormon Stories. John Dehlin Book Club, Rebecca Biblioteca is the co-host. It's fabulous. They have tremendous guests. It's spectacular. We are putting Dan's book in as one of the books in the book club, and I've already read it, and I'm going through it for a second time tonight. I get to interview the author. We want to sell this book out, not because I make any money. I get the thrill of a new understanding, and this book is a game changer. So that's enough for me. You're not here to listen to me, even though you're going to have to. Oh, thank you, Newton Lemnos. You're way too kind. They say they love me, Dan. They say they love you, Dan. So it looks like we're already a smash hit. Let's get this on the road. Looks like there's 80 people here. Fantastic.
Better quit while we're ahead.
Yeah, let's stop right now. Thanks for coming over, you guys. See you later. Oh, we've got about 4 hours worth of information to give you tonight. So
I'm not so sure about that, but
well, okay. Be sure and let me know. Let me know if my mic makes me start sounding like Darth Vader. I'm going to try to hold it a little further away from me this time. It's goofed up a couple of times, luckily toward the end. So anyway, so Dan, what on earth? 845-page mammoth whopping book. I was sad that it ended. I know it means you have more work to do. Your fingers must be wore out for typing all those pages. Yes, I understand that, but you're the author, so shut up and listen. Next time we want a 1,500-page book. Don't be such a wuss and give us only 800.
How about 8 volumes? I mean,
love it. This is so pleasurable to have the real history, the real deal. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm thoroughly enjoying it again. I'm going to encourage every one of my viewers, seriously, you're cheating yourselves if you don't get this book. So when do you suspect it'll come out in paperback? Don't they usually have the hardcover about a first year?
Well, they don't tell me anything.
Oh, don't they? Well, it's okay. Buy the hardcover. It's a collector's edition.
Yeah.
Mine especially, because I have already all my notes and my own index and all that. And Dan's, by the way, here's a good plug for you, Dan. I know you personally made the index. Sensationally well done. Folks, this book has a real index. I'm serious. That's one of the criteria for a good book. Most books' indexes just don't cut the mustard. This one does. Really, truly, seriously. So
I forget how long it is. It's quite long, though.
Several dozen pages. Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. Explicit in detail, and he even put it in alphabetical order, if you can believe that. So
I had to do it like in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I remember talking to you.
You wait and you wait and you wait, and then they say, well, we need this. Here it is. We need it in 2 weeks. So,
and you accommodated them. I would have rebelled. But of course, then after putting 4 years into it, I wouldn't have rebelled. I'd have done it. So, okay, so
I made a few indexes before. Yeah. So
we're grateful that you love to write. So let's get on with it. Here's the cover. When you see this book in a store, and you won't see it in used bookstores for quite a while yet, it's going to be bought new and on Amazon, etc. Go get it. I promise. Yes. Oh, Lee Mortensen, welcome. Look at this, Dan. They're already talking about us. Check this out. Dan Vogel, Carrie, indexes. What more could we want? I love it. Yeah. See, this is the
most exciting part of the book.
Just so, they're really responding.
Yeah.
This is good. This is good because indexes are a must, and this one has it, which is really.
You got to read the index too.
And besides that, it's a great cover. I actually do read indexes.
I really like that cover.
Yeah, I love it. Who'd you have make that?
or what's his name?
Who made that? Do you know?
No, I forget his name right offhand.
You got to look it up. There you
Oh, I
go.
can't find it. Oh yeah, Jason Francis.
Okay, well, tell him congratulations. It's a great cover.
Couldn't remember his last name.
I've got. I don't even have your book down here with me. Criminy, I went to work today and gad free.
He does a great job on all the indexes, I think. Oh,
Yeah.
I think he made the one for my book on the Book of Abraham.
Yeah. You say you did that one also?
He did that, Jason.
Really, that one was a good one too. I've got it in here somewhere. Yeah, your Book of Abraham one that is a good indexed book
See what
too.
I'm doing, but
And see that is one of the attraction of your books is you're smart. You've got some good people helping you out. Make your book
I
even
think he
better.
does a pretty good job on these covers.
Yeah.
And that's not all he does. He does a bunch of other stuff too. But
Yeah.
And I must say before we launch into this, that you did a review already of the book, and you just took the heart of the book, I thought, and just went through the whole thing, and that was the rise and what I call the rise and demise of Zion. We're going to talk
Well, that was your best part. Sorry.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that, about, where's Zion? It's everywhere now, but it was a specific place.
And if everywhere, it's nowhere.
It's supposed to be.
Right.
That was Joseph Smith's mission, and it never came to fruition.
No. And he really didn't be lax about it. He gave his life to trying to get that. Your book actually
we tried several times, but
you brought that out very well.
Every time he failed. So, on paper, he's what you would call a failed prophet, just like so many other prophets. And but he manages to get a following anyway. I mean, that's a trick.
That is a trick. Yeah,
that is a trick. That is, but he did it. We're going to talk a little bit about that too, of how he did it. And it's quite inevitable anyway, that he has to deal with failure, because anybody that predicts the end of the world, usually, until that last person, everybody's going to be wrong. But
yeah, that's a good point, though. Yeah, that's a real good point. There's a lot of movements still viable today who were apocalyptic in the 1800s and 1700s. Yeah.
How do you deal with failure of prophecy?
Yeah.
When that was your mission to begin
well,
with.
it's always the follower's fault in one way or another. Someone miscalculated, or someone wasn't worthy enough, or they bickered, or whatever. Just like he complained at science camp. And that was a fascinating part of your book, that science camp. The way you handled that was really
science camp is the failure of charisma.
Yeah. The failure of charisma. Yeah, that's one of his chapters, you guys. Fabulous chapter.
Yeah, well, it's a section. There's like 3 sections. One of them's a failure. The survival of charisma. How does it survive? So in the title is so that's part of what I wanted to talk about a little bit, is what is meant by this title. What is charismatic authority?
What is?
So the second slide would help.
Well, I just wanted to see your lovely face.
So I made this little background of Joseph Smith and the eyes,
I love the eyes between
That's
the two.
Charisma right there.
That is. You're looking charisma in the eyes right there, folks.
So what is meant by this title? What is charismatic authority? What puts charisma under pressure? What's the pressure on charisma?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had never thought of that before.
So what happens when charisma is pressured? And this is all, if you go to the next slide, I found the answer pretty much in Max Weber.
Who is this guy?
This is Max Weber. He's the German sociologist. that wrote a book.
I was told he was a communist. What are you doing using a communist, Dan Vogel? How could you?
Well, we quote all sorts of people, don't we?
We do. That's only because the church doesn't.
Well, I'll quote Mormon apologists.
There
anyway,
you go. So, hey, T.O. has a good point. Charismatic authority resonates with Nibley's idea of mantic. That's kind of yeah. Oh, hey, they're asking you, can you get a little closer to your mic?
Am I too far away, or is this better?
Apparently, they're asking if you could get just a little closer because they want to hear every word you say tonight.
Everywhere. Turn it up full blast. Yeah, I see that. Sorry if I sound too far away. I need to get a microphone like Carrie has.
I don't know. Mine makes me sound like Darth Vader after an hour. Yes, he says it does help very well. So good. Yeah, you sound better. So go ahead and lean into it, my friend. So just like you did this book. So Max Weber, why did you choose him? Why did you choose this guy? I mean, why didn't you choose why didn't you choose someone like Harold B. Lee or something?
I draw on all sorts of disciplines. And
yes, you do.
People that don't want to mix their history with sociology and don't want to mix their history with, psychology. But I when in the university, I didn't take just history. I took all the social sciences, and to me, they're all pretty much a soft science anyway. But Max Weber, I got onto. I can't remember how I got onto him, but I did, and he wrote on charisma and institution building, and his ideas are really big right now. Especially, they use it to, people that advise companies use.
Oh yeah,
Weber,
that's interesting.
The charismatic leadership, and the dangers of charismatic leadership. And some benefits from charismatic leadership, and what is charismatic leadership? Well, so let's go to the next slide then and talk about what is charismatic authority. And so a lot of organizations begin with a charismatic leader, but we'll learn from Max Weber that in order to survive, they can't stay in that charismatic mode forever, or else they'll splinter. And there's a lot of competition with other charismatics in your group, especially if you rely on charismatic authority, because charismatic authority is not legalistic in nature; it's revolutionary in nature. And so
I don't suppose charismatic authority is given by the laying on of the hands, is it?
No, it's endowed by God, and it's a special gift that nobody else is supposed to have anyway. It's a type of power legitimated by perceived extraordinary characteristics that inspires devotion and obedience from followers. So, I might be more intellectual. I'll probably have a hard time trying to get people to follow me because I'm not charismatic enough. But
me either. Join the club. You're vastly more than I ever will be, so you're good.
Well, I talk a little bit about how narcissistic personalities tend to have those qualities naturally.
Yes, it is. And boy, did Joseph have them. Yeah.
So they're kind of in psychology, you can learn about these narcissistic personality traits. I don't say Joseph Smith was had narcissistic personality disorder. I don't try to diagnose him. I just say he had narcissistic qualities, and that is kind of generally true of a lot of leaders also. So I'm not saying all that much, but I try to talk.
We're not trying to psychologize Joseph Smith into a disordered freak, because he wasn't.
No, well, we don't want to
But
try to diagnose the dead, but we
right,
can say
right.
that he may have
We
had
can diagnose. We can
personality
diagnose
disorder.
their writings, though.
Well, he may have had such a disorder. But there's just no way to do it to pin it on him. Okay, so I remember advising my friend Larry Foster. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Oh
Religion and
yeah, Lawrence Foster.
sexuality,
Yeah.
religion and sexuality and stuff. And he's written. He's very brave. He's a non-Mormon and interested in Mormon history, and he's kind of brave. He'll talk about psychology and history, and I remember critiquing a paper privately, and he was trying to diagnose Joseph Smith and go with the Robert Anderson, inside the mind of Joseph Smith, and actually diagnose him with narcissistic personality disorder, malignant type, and so I told him that why risk that? You don't get any benefit out of actually going through it for a whole full diagnosis. Just talk about narcissistic traits. When he says he's the greatest guy that's ever lived, he's organized a church that never fell apart, and Jesus couldn't even do that. And especially in Nauvoo, he started becoming pretty narcissistic. Full-blown kind of expression of it, and so I talked him out of doing that and to kind of tone it down. So that gives you an idea of where I'm at, and I do talk about that in the introduction, and I bring it up later in the prologue. So
Right.
or the whatever the what is it, aftermath. I forget what I called it.
Afterward or whatever. That's
So
the
anyway,
index.
Max Weber says that charismatic leaders have a certain quality of an individual personality by virtue of which he is set, or she maybe, is set apart from ordinary men and treated as endowed with supernatural, superhuman, or at least specifically exceptional powers or qualities. These are such as are not accessible to the ordinary person, but are regarded as of divine origin or exemplary, and on the basis of them, the individual concerned is treated as a leader.
That's interesting.
So this is actually imputed by the followers. They think this guy has special qualities that they themselves do not have. And with narcissism, it helps because narcissists are self-assured. They never question or doubt themselves. They never second guess themselves, and that is the quality that attracts the ordinary person. And it doesn't matter if the person there's no magical charisma, really. We'll talk about it.
Oh, wait. No, that's not true, because you also did a video on Joseph Smith's magic parchments and the Jupiter talisman. So there you have it. He had that talisman that gave him the power, pal. You put a good video, man. It's got over 11,000 views in just 1 week. That's spectacular. I've been yelling at everybody to go watch it. So yeah, that was well done, by the way. So don't downplay the magic. I loved how you did. I loved how you did your research. That was sensational video.
Yeah, it happens that we'll be this Wednesday be talking about the parchments, my book, and the parchments on Mormonism Live. So everybody meet me there on Wednesday night.
Nice, very
8:20. Yeah. And it's fun. It's a subject that
this is Dan Vogel week. This is Dan Vogel week. Good deal.
So, okay, we're on our next one. Joseph Smith qualifies as a charismatic leader, right?
Explain that first sentence to me. I don't get it. Called by an angel, no first vision.
Yeah. Okay. So he was called by an angel in 1823. There's no first vision. He wasn't called. He may have had some kind of charismatic experience in 1820 or 21, depending on which history you're reading. But it wasn't in the 1832 account. It's a vision, but I believe the original story was it was a born again experience. It wasn't a vision. At any rate, even in the 1832 account, it's not a foundational event. It's a personal event dealing with his forgiveness of sins. Right? He's not being called as a prophet to found a religion. Okay.
Wait a minute. You're not using the official 1838 account, Mr.
No.
Vogel. You're using the early 1832 account. How could you do that?
Yeah. Well, so
that's fascinating, though. When the way you put it, the way you put it, that's
closer
important
to the event, right? So historians have a tendency to prefer accounts that are closer to the event, and
definitely.
The 1838 account is an official account and written for the institution that he's already built. And 1832, the thing about the 1832, the reason why it's so different is because there's no angelic ordinations yet. So,
right.
So it's a charismatic authority. Cool. It's a charismatic authority at this time. The authority in the early church was given by revelation, not by the laying on of hands of some angel. Okay,
now that's important.
That's a legalistic notion of authority, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what was the authority of the church based on? I mean, you read the Articles and Covenants of the church, which is section 20 of the Doctrine and Covenants, right? So section 20 of the Doctrine and Covenants should have laid out the authority upon which the church was founded. And it should mention angels ordaining Joseph Smith and Robert Cowdery, but it doesn't. It says that an angel appeared to Joseph Smith in 1823. It's, whatever you want to call this angel. Nephi,
and by the way, I did have
probably originally.
I did have that Joseph Smith Papers book we were talking about on the phone the other day. You guys need
the Revelation.
The Revelations. You guys really need to get this book. Of the Joseph Smith Papers, or at least look it up online, because everything Dan is saying can be verified in these books, the Joseph Smith Papers, the Revelations and translations, the manuscript Revelation books. Absolutely sensational to get to what was early and then through later times where the changes are. And the Tanners have documented all those changes, and they're not just minor nitpick grammatical or a comma instead of a period changes. These are whole concepts such as a first vision or as an angelic visitant later, giving them authority that they never bothered to tell anyone. And it was not in the original D&C 20 until later when they added it.
It's not even in there now. The first mention of the angel ordinations is D&C 27. Which is given in September, originally given in September 1830, and then revised in 1835 to include mention of Peter, James, and John restoring the apostleship and John the Baptist appearing and ordaining them. So it says John, who I've sent to ordain you. So anyway, that's the first mention. 1835 Doctrine and Covenants. So the original authority of that the church was founded on was revelation, and it's the commandment by God's command to do whatever is the authority. God commanded you to do it. That's authority to do it. You don't need to be ordained or anything in this charismatic origin time period. So
this worked for a time, as you noted in your book. This is why you guys want this book, because everything we've been complaining about that the church has whitewashed or left out or changed on purpose to become faith promoting, Dan didn't do that in this book. He just lays out the material and you can see it all for yourself. So support Dan in this and purchase this book. I can't say that enough, you guys. I'm sincerely serious. Eat macaroni and cheese for lunch for 2 weeks. Save your pennies and buy this book if you can't afford it, because it's well worth it. Because this is the stuff that we've been screaming our heads off. Why didn't I know about this, etc.? Now you can in a much more straightforward way. And it does give credit where credit is due. And it also gives skepticism where skepticism is due. It gives analysis that doesn't denigrate Joseph Smith. And it gives analysis that puts Joseph Smith in a, for lack of a better way to describe this, Dan, I'm going to say a more realistic context. Because when a prophecy is discussed in, for instance, the LDS book, the new book, the Saints book, and No Unhallowed Hand and a Sure Foundation and all that noise, their narrative history, they don't explain the consequences of what Joseph was saying and what he was having others do, etc. Dan's book does. And this is where I learned, and I know I'm late to the party. I'm always late to the party. I learned literally, and I said this in my video, none of the prophecies of Joseph Smith were fulfilled when it comes to this New Jerusalem. I don't mean some were and some weren't. None were. And that was a disaster and it grated on him. That's the point of one of the chapters, Charisma Under Pressure. This is why Joseph Smith had to come back later on, after Zion failed, and change the revelations to include all of these Peter, James, and John. Oh, we've got the Melchizedek priesthood, and now we've got the authority and all that, because he had to rebuild his charisma. So, hope I didn't take too much thunder out of your. I didn't, but
yeah, he did rebuild his authority, but he changed it from a charismatic-based authority to a legalistic authority. The reason for that was it would be harder for usurpers to branch off because they would break the chain. So if you have a chain of ordinations, it's hard to break that chain and then claim authority. If you have charismatic-based authority, God called me and I got commandments through revelations and I'm obeying those commandments, and that's my authority. It's easy for someone else to come along and have a revelation and branch off.
Hiram Page and his own seer stone, for instance.
We'll be talking about the different.
Okay. Shut up, Kerry.
People that tried to usurp. But Protestants, when they broke off from Catholicism, they had to have a way of legitimizing their claim to founding churches, various churches, and so they said the Bible. The commandment in the Bible to baptize, go out into the world and baptize, that commandment in the Bible is the authority. And Oliver Cowdery wrote an article in the Messenger and Advocate saying, well, can anyone claim authority that deny revelations, current revelations? And so his view, and Joe Smith's view, was that the command had to be a revealed commandment right then. And if you ever get a chance to read my book on religious seekers, you'll read in there about people who anticipated such a restoration. They thought either there would be an endowment, like a day of Pentecost, and the Spirit would be a spiritual endowment, and that would be a restoration of authority, and new apostles would be called through this endowment, or an angel will come and ordain. So in the Seeker book, and I mentioned Max Weber even back then in 1989, I think it is. The church shifted from one kind of seeker, a charismatic seeker, to a more legalistic, angel ordination seeker. So Joe Smith kind of shifted. That's probably where he got his idea about possibility of angels coming and ordaining humans and
Yeah.
restoring a different kind of authority.
Well, Sidney Rigdon had a big influence on his theme of the Melchizedek priesthood. Am I right in saying that? When Sidney Rigdon showed up, that really helped Joseph Smith begin
Well,
elaborating more on the ordained priesthood and the offices and all that, right?
well, Melchizedek priesthood is the priesthood of all believers in Christ. Christ is the great high priest. So this after the order of Melchizedek. So Christ's priesthood is Melchizedek. So the unusual part that Mormons have is the restoration of the Aaronic priesthood. Why does the New Testament church have the Aaronic priesthood? Why is it necessary to have the Aaronic priesthood? That's the strange one.
And okay. Jesus never did have it. It's only about Melchizedek.
It was done away with the law of Moses.
Right.
The Aaronic priest administered the law of Moses. But Joseph Smith had an apologetic to justify the restoration of the Aaronic priesthood. And they put this justification in the mouth of the angel, John the Baptist. And that was, upon you, my fellow servants, I confer this priesthood, and that this priesthood will remain on earth until the sons of Levi offer an offering in righteousness. So they took the passage out of Malachi and said that
put it in John the Baptist's mouth. Interesting.
That the priesthood in the last days, the sons of Levi will offer an offering in righteousness, and that was in Malachi. So that's what they used as an apologetic to justify restoring the Aaronic priesthood. That's the strange one, not the Melchizedek priesthood, not the high priesthood.
Interesting.
So anyway, so back to our we're on another one.
Sorry, I accidentally hit the button. May as well stay here.
So Joseph Smith was called by an angel, and that gave him this charismatic authority. So he qualifies as a charismatic leader because he claimed this. He performed the miracle of the Book of Mormon, and this was actually Max Weber talked about Joseph Smith in his writings, and he mentioned the Book of Mormon. And that the Book of Mormon was Joseph Smith's miracle that proved his calling, that gave him authority to command people and so forth. Then authority based on revealed commandments, which we just talked about, or angelic ordination. So then we'll go on to how is charisma pressured? Okay, so it's pressure because of challengers and competing revelations. So a lot of people don't know that. Oliver Cowdery, he was trying to compete with Joseph Smith in translating the Book of Mormon. So he came with the rod. So he was a competitor in a way. And if you read my last biography, I talked about how the Book of Mormon addresses that in Mosiah chapter 8, where it says a seer is greater than a prophet, right? Because he has a seer stone, he can see things. And so Joseph Smith is telling Oliver Cowdery that his gift of seeing is greater than his working the rod.
Rod of Aaron,
yeah.
And that revelation, interestingly, has been changed 3 different times, trying to get rid of the earlier folk magic theme that was in that revelation.
That's right. Yeah, it hides it. It doesn't even talk about the rod of Aaron. I mean, it says the gift of Aaron. But Oliver Cowdery also received a revelation in 1829 about the founding of the church. And so his revelation is kind of a response to D&C 18. D&C 18 called Oliver Cowdery and David Whitmer to choose the 12 disciples, and the 12 disciples will ordain priests and teachers and build up the church. Well, evidently Oliver Cowdery didn't like that idea. He got a revelation of his own, calling himself to be an apostle, that he's called an apostle as the Apostle Paul was called an apostle. And Oliver Cowdery said that it was hit in this revelation that it was his calling to ordain priests and teachers and to build up the church. Well, Joseph Smith said that this revelation was of the devil, but it is in that book you just held up a moment ago. Cowdery's revelation is in that the Commandments and Revelations book, mostly written by John Whitmer, copied the original dictated manuscripts into that book, and then they carried it to Independence, Missouri, where they set the type for the Book of Commandments. Well, so Oliver Cowdery is a competitor, and to me, it's no surprise that he gets the calling to go to Independence, Missouri, and get out of he gets Oliver Cowdery out of the state, and gives him another mission, and he goes. He's out of the state. He's not influencing anybody over there in Independence, Missouri. So then there's Hiram Page. We all know that story quite well. He had a little black stone. He got a choir, it says, of revelations that named Fayette as the Zion, basically. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Joseph Smith got a counter revelation and said that his was of the devil. This is how charismatic authority handles
everyone else is devil. I'm God. Yeah,
well,
I'm from
it's
God.
dueling charismas. You know what I mean? He has to out charisma them. You know what I mean? So,
well, didn't one of the witnesses to the Book of Mormon actually accept Hiram Page's revelations from the seer stone? And that's what spooked Joseph Smith
and Cowdery.
And And
Cowdery.
Yeah, that's what spooked Joseph Smith. He said, wait a minute, those are my guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So Joseph Smith, that was a challenge that he had to overcome. And so he gave the revelation to Oliver Cowdery and told Oliver Cowdery to tell Hiram Page that this is not the order of heaven and all that kind of stuff. So then when he gets to Kirtland, Ohio area, there's a Miss Hubble who gets revelations, and then Joseph Smith gets another revelation to handle her. So the reason why I'm emphasizing that is because as time goes on, he builds up an institution, and the institution takes care of these guys. He doesn't have to do it every time, and he doesn't have to get a revelation. He sets up the High Council, well, the Bishop's Court and the High Council. Okay, we'll see that. Talk about that a little bit.
Because he can't be everywhere all at once, all the time. Yeah.
Well, he can't get a revelation for each and every situation,
Right.
So he sets up the rules by which people can do things, and they are tried for their membership if they break the rules or try to usurp authority. So I have Edward Partridge. Now, Edward Partridge was the bishop. He was called the bishop. They had bishops in Alexander Campbell's organization, the Disciples of Christ. And so Edward Partridge was called as a bishop. And as it turns out, Sidney Rigdon was a bishop in Campbell's organization. So Edward Partridge is called to go to Independence, Missouri, and the bishop there, and they're preparing Zion and the United Order and all that kind of stuff. But when Joseph Smith goes there to visit in 1831, and he locates this is the spot where the temple's going to be built by Revelation, Edward Partridge kind of complained that the quality of the land was not so great. And Joseph Smith flew into a rage. Ezra Booth later talked about this in 1831, so that's pretty close to the event. Ezra Booth talked about how he wrote a letter to Edward Partridge saying, what did you think when Joseph Smith was acting unbecoming, to his station, that it was bordered on madness. It bordered on madness. Yeah, Joseph Smith was a hothead. Joseph Smith was a hothead. I mean, this guy got in fights with people, even his own brother-in-law.
His own brother-in-law, yeah.
His own brother-in-law, slapped him a little bit, kind because they had some kind of dispute. Well,
So we had a quick question. Do you mind if I divert you just a
no, go
little
right
bit?
ahead. I love questions.
This was such a wonderful question. I hope I can find it. It was by T.O.
Yeah,
And
write them in
well,
all caps or something, right? So they stand out.
yeah, here it is. It's well documented that Rigdon and others were far better preachers than Joseph. What accounts for Joseph's extra charisma? Would you mind if I briefly answer that and then you can
Yeah, go ahead.
expound?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is one of the best parts of your introduction, and I'm really grateful that you gave us a good introduction. I mean, it wasn't just a 3-pager; it was more like 19 to 20, and it was fabulous. Joseph Smith. Now, the apologetic is that, of course, and he wasn't as good a preacher as some of these others. You've got that right, T.O. My understanding, based on reading some guy named Vogel, is that Joseph Smith was uneducated, and the apologetic is such that they emphasize that, third grade education, etc. There's no way he could write the Book of Mormon. Interestingly, Dan demonstrates how Joseph Smith himself downplayed his own education in order to give that extra charismatic, miraculous effect. But the other thing that is really interesting is there are many, many witnesses in Joseph Smith's day who compared both Joseph and Rigdon, and they agreed with what you're saying, T.O. They said, well, I love listening to Rigdon. He's a great rhetorician. He's got fabulous language skills and all, but Joseph Smith is the more intelligent. Joseph Smith had a native or an acquired intelligence that was beyond the excellent speakers, and I would propose that is one reason, and there's many examples in this introduction where they say, yes, Joseph Smith gave us a sermon for 6 hours today, and I could listen to every word he says, although he is kind of folksy, and he really doesn't have a command of the language, but he presents it in such a manner that it is so intelligent that you can realize how he understands the scripture. So that would be you go ahead and take it away. But I thought that was one of your best points is from now on, whenever I hear the apologetic, Joseph Smith was uneducated, that's only a part of the issue. He was, but that doesn't take away that he had a more powerful native intelligence than a lot of the other people around him. I love that.
Yeah. So when Joseph Smith gets criticized for his public speaking, it's usually in comparison to, preachers like Rigdon, who he among preachers he was better, than the average preacher even. So he would be hard to compete against. But there was a style of preaching that people would expect to occur, and oratory kind of situation, and that would be Rigdon would be really good at that kind of thing. But Methodists prided themselves in not having a prepared text to speak from the heart and plainly, and just like the Book of Mormon says, we're not mighty in writing, but in speaking. If we were there in person to speak, you would feel our message, So Joe Smith was like that. He wasn't a boring speaker. Nobody went away saying, "Whoa, what a boring, horrible speaker he was."
Not ever. They said the opposite.
He just didn't compare with the eloquence that was expected on the level of Rigdon and maybe partly B. Pratt, preachers for a living at one time, So he still had power in his delivery, and some descriptions, but these are kind of later in Nauvoo, talk about him very animated in his speaking. and that, and one in, I think it's Lorenzo Snow was talking about when he was speaking in Hiram, Ohio, when he first moved there or visited there. I believe it was in 1831, and said that he started off speaking just normal, and
Yeah.
was a person.
Uh-oh, you're freezing up, Dan. Oh, crap, you're frozen.
Stories, and if you have a person stating
Okay,
about their visions,
hold it. You
we
just
want
froze up
control.
for about the last 15 seconds. Repeat what you were saying.
Oh, I just saw a
About
circle going.
Joseph Smith
So
started slowly and gently, and then what?
yeah, and he built up, and towards the end of the delivery was more animated, but he was more his style was more narrative and personal stories. So he was probably talking about visions and God told me, and that right there is charisma. But it's charisma, as we will discuss later, has nothing to do with the person himself. Okay, it's the audience that supplies some of it. Okay, it's a symbiosis. Okay, and charisma is an illusion that's created, and there's some people that are, I don't see any charisma in some. I will not name any of these politicians, but some people think that they have great charisma, and I'm like, what? And so the same thing with Joseph Smith. Some people would be very moved by every word that he said, and that thought they would think he had this great charisma, and they would see it like him glowing. They would. So in the introduction, I quote a lot of followers, people that eventually became followers, giving these descriptions of Joseph Smith that just cannot be real. As a person would stand there looking at him, glowing, his face glowing, and he
They did describe that. Yeah.
yeah, all that kind of stuff.
He made sure he spoke early in the morning and faced west, so the sun was to his back. Yeah.
Well, and it was supplied by the viewer. Okay.
Yeah.
And the other people didn't see any of that. Okay.
No.
They saw an ordinary folksy guy that talked with bad grammar, that used one guy
He made interesting points, but
made interesting points, they
yeah.
said, and they were very original. Okay.
Oh yeah, there you
And
go.
they wanted to hear what he had to say.
The spellbound.
He commanded attention. But he used too many words, they said. He would use too many words, and he was wordy, and he finally come around to making his point, even though it was a good point. Well, so I would say, as we go along, charisma is not produced by great speaking.
Here's a good question by Landon Brophy, if we can get another one in here. His early writings seemed very uneducated, but his later writings are very polished. Were the scribes cleaning up for him and making them sound better, or did he improve over time?
Well, W.W. Phelps was his ghostwriter.
There you go. Yeah,
so,
good question. Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, he wasn't as bad as Emma Smith said. He couldn't write a coherent letter. That's not true.
That's not true.
Not
yeah.
True. That's her.
Yeah, we have Dean Jesse to thank for that.
Okay. What?
Yeah. We have Dean Jesse to thank for that, because he gave us all his personal writings, and some of those are incredible. Really.
And they wrote in a whole different style, the Romantic style back then. And we've lost that nowadays. A lot of people sounded very eloquent to me. I read their stuff, and they sound far more eloquent than a lot of letter writing nowadays. And at any rate, so Edward Partridge had this confrontation, and part of it was an ongoing thing that lasted several years, actually. So Bishop Edward Partridge was called to be the bishop, and he thought he should act independently. He's called, that's his stewardship, and he will follow it and administrate it as the Spirit dictates to him. And Joseph Smith had to put him in his place in a way over time. And one of the ways he did that was to introduce, well, he introduced the high priesthood in June 1831, but in 1832, he introduced the president of the high priesthood suddenly. And this is in D&C 107. D&C 107 is another one of those revelations that were expanded greatly. It was a priesthood revelation, but the early revelation was given in November of 1831. And it called Joseph Smith to be the president of the high priesthood and said a bishop is not equal to it. Well, that's pretty clear what he's trying to do with Bishop Partridge there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Partridge being a bishop, coming from his Protestant background, didn't Partridge kind of understand his particular calling and office, that he was over the Missouri church?
Well, yeah. So he thought he was, and then later the High Council is organized in 1834, and this is where David Whitmer, John Whitmer, and W.W. Phelps become the presidency of the High Council, and they act as the Missouri presidency. And that happened in 1838. Joseph Smith has to remove all of them before he moves there. But
yeah,
I cover all of that. So get the book and read all these details. But so in 1831, Joseph Smith calls himself to be the president of the high priesthood. In January, the next January, 1832, he in the Amherst conference in Amherst, Ohio, he is actually ordained and sustained as president of the high priesthood. There's no president of the church, kind of per se, that kind of concept.
And there's no talking about Melchizedek priesthood yet here, is there? No. This is high priesthood. Let's keep that separate. Dan's book is excellent on this too, you guys. Joseph Smith was ordained in 1831 to the high priesthood. And yet he did
ordained in the Amherst conference.
Wasn't he supposed to have the priesthood to be able to organize the church, though, in 1830? I mean, there's chronological issues like that Dan deals with. So I'm telling you, it's spectacular. Sorry to interrupt you, but I really loved your book so much. So anyway,
thank you.
All right. My pleasure. Thank you.
So and then in April, he goes down to Missouri for his second trip, April 1832, and he's sustained as president of the high priesthood there. Okay. And then Joseph Smith leaves. But when he leaves, he starts getting all these nasty letters from the Missouri church. They sustained him, but then they started thinking, well, he wants to dictate to us. He wants to become a dictator, and they had second thoughts, and so it wasn't quite over with. The high priesthood didn't quite solve that problem, and there's this ongoing problem. The angel ordination thing helps somewhat, and so anyway, so Edward Partridge, he is another challenger. David Whitmer is another challenger. He didn't want Joseph Smith to publish the revelations. Well, it's only going to publish. We're only going to publish your revelations. Are you going to publish the ones that didn't quite come to pass, like that Canadian revelation? And Joseph says no, and David Whitmer says,
knock it off, David.
It wasn't true. So
this is where they start sifting the revelations from the devil from the revelations of God to Joseph Smith, and I'm publishing only the good ones in.
Yeah, well, and then you fix things later,
Yeah, always fix things later. Yep.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot, and that's why that book you showed is so important, because it shows a lot of the changes. If you go through and you try to study why this is being changed, you can see the development in the early church, especially of authority.
Yeah, and this is the stuff you will not get in Sunday school, folks. I so promise. Yeah.
So, and then another thing that puts charisma under pressure is unfulfilled prophecy, right? Like the loss of Zion. Zion's lost in 1833, right? The press is destroyed in July of 1833, and by November, December, they're being pushed out of Jackson County, the Holy Land. This is the Holy Land. This is God called us to come to this Holy Land and build a temple. And how can the enemies thwart that? The enemies are stronger than God. What's going on here? So that causes a crisis of the faith. And then Joseph Smith, the attempted redemption of Zion, 1834 was the big one with the Zion's camp, and that didn't pan out. They didn't make it back to Jackson County, Missouri, and Joseph Smith had to explain why not, and it was because of the rebellion during the march there and things like that. He blamed his followers. He ended up, that's how he got out of it being his problem. But so then there's also conduct unbecoming of a prophet. that's my
This is interesting. And again, this ties in with the congregation, the crowd, who the symbiotic relationship, they are giving him charismatic authority, but if he starts misbehaving the way they think he shouldn't behave, then that authority can be lost. Once he institutionalizes this authority through the laying on of hands and the priesthood offices, they lose this option. It eventually gets to the point to where, Heil Joseph! You can't even say he didn't tie his shoes. They actually cheated with the legalities of issues in Nauvoo, 1843 and 1844, to get Joseph Smith off the hook when they knew he was guilty. And
you mean the trial of Sylvester Smith?
Yeah, you couldn't do that if it was only charismatics. So that's why this evolution is so important to grasp. That's why Dan is making such a big deal about this charisma issue, because Joseph Smith recognizes through time that charisma isn't where it's at, although he wants to keep it, especially in Nauvoo for polygamy. Yes, but he needs more. And that's why this evolution of authority is not something I ever learned in church. This has got to be one of the signature pillar parts of Dan's analysis historically, is he shows this evolving, the changing, and the why it changed. And this third group, it's not because it's all faith promoting and God is giving us a continuing restoration. Not happening. There is a reason, and it's all for his power. So, okay. Sorry to interrupt you, but that was really important, I think. So
Max Weber talks about that instead of charisma presiding in the person, the cult of personality, right? Mm-hmm. It resides in the office. Okay, so that guy's the president of the church. It's like the president of the church. Are any of these guys charismatic if they weren't the president of the church? No. So, but you make them president of the church, all of a sudden, wow, people are falling all over him, like trying to hear every word he says. And same thing with the Pope. It's the charisma of office. It has nothing to do with their actual personalities. Before they were in these offices, they were nobody. They just ordinary guys. They weren't exceptionally charismatic or anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so
so this altercation with Bishop Partridge.
Yeah. So people start seeing through that facade of charisma, right? they start seeing the human side. So he has this altercation bordering on madness, right? And then he has another altercation with Sylvester Smith in 1834 in Zion's camp. And
that lasted several days. That lasted several days, if not weeks.
It was off and on through the
it was a pain for both of them. Well, I mean, you march almost barefoot and for 800 miles through swamp and desert and brush. I mean, and then, yeah, they dang near starved to death. They were eating squirrels and weeds and sagebrush because they ran out of provisions. The revelation told them, get $2,000. They got $189.43. I mean, the whole thing was just idiotic. So,
so there is the adjustment does have a militant strain in his religion, it's in the Book of Mormon. There is this danger in the Book of Mormon. There is this the Indians or Native Americans uniting with the believing Gentiles and going through the nation, tearing them to pieces like a lion the lamb. It's quoting from Jesus. 3 Nephi 20 and 22 is Jesus quoting Micah out of the Old Testament about this lion tearing the lamb to pieces kind of metaphor, and the Indians purifying America, saving America, from the nation that forgets the God of this land, who is Jesus Christ, according to the Book of Ether, shall be swept off.
Yeah,
we'll get to that too. So,
and that was one of the pressures of his charisma, this Indian issue, wasn't it? Yeah, we'll get to that.
Then I threw the affair with Fanny Alger in there. It was known. Cowdery used it, actually. So a part of this book, there's a thread that runs through it, is Cowdery's very ambitious, and he's trying to take Joseph Smith out and become the leader of the church himself. Because there was a point with this Fanny Alger situation that he was bringing up. Joseph Smith could be tried, and he, at the time, in 1834, December 5th, 1834, Oliver Cowdery was ordained as an assistant or co-president of the church. All of a sudden, he was second elder, but that wasn't all that big of a deal. He was just a second elder. Joseph Smith now was president of the high priesthood. So Cowdery was just kind of dwindling, and Sidney Rigdon kind of became his spokesman. Remember, Cowdery was supposed to be the spokesman. Sidney Rigdon became the spokesman. He became the second in command. When Joseph Smith left Kirtland, Ohio, he put Sidney Rigdon in charge, not Oliver Cowdery. Oliver Cowdery was there, but he didn't put the church in charge of Oliver Cowdery. He put it in charge of Sidney Rigdon. Well, so in September of 1834, Oliver Cowdery is the first one to announce publicly that he and Joseph Smith were ordained by an angel. He doesn't name the angel in the Messenger and Advocate. John the Baptist gets named in the first edition of the Doctrine and Covenants. But
now you saw this as a power move on Cowdery's point, didn't you? Because he's the first one to publish this. Why wouldn't Joseph Smith have said that? Right?
Joseph Smith needed his help. He needed a witness. He needed, so they want this authority to occur before the church was organized. But so Oliver Cowdery comes out, and for a while in 1834, at the end of 1834 and 1835, they are very close, working together hand in hand. And for Joseph Smith to have this indiscretion with Fanny Alger and be tried and removed from his station would put Oliver Cowdery in charge. So Joseph Smith has to outmaneuver Cowdery, and he does. And that's part of the book, is how he does that. And the whole presidency, Missouri presidency, So when Joseph Smith, Albert Cowdery brings this Fanny Alger thing out in 1838, just before Joseph Smith leaves for Missouri, to reside there permanently in 1838, excuse me. So, uh, so Cowdery brings this out. Joseph Smith receives 3 revelations before he leaves Kirtland, Ohio, that makes it almost near impossible to try the presidency. And they're still unpublished, these revelations. On January 12th, I think it is, just before they left, 1838.
He's feeling the heat, so he gets a revelation to put him above the heat,
saying that no one can call themselves a stake without the first presidency's approval. And then another revelation said that in order to try a member of the first presidency, there has to be unanimous approval or agreement to remove the president from office by,
like I said, becoming
all of the stakes of Zion, right? So it has to be unanimous in each of the stakes. You used to be before this, you would be tried by the bishop's court by guess who?
Very important development.
Edward
Now
Partridge, or Neil K. Whitney. So so he made it difficult before he got there in 1838, and before he left and got to Missouri, he had Apostle Thomas B. Marsh try part of the first presidency of Missouri, the presidency of Missouri Church, and they were excommunicated. And then Joseph Smith got there, and then shortly after that, Cowdery and I think it's David Whitmer get excommunicated. So he has no competitors now.
And by the way, I'd like to share a comment by JC. Thank you. This is basically what I'm saying. The Saints' book treatment of the Fanny Alger scrape is classic bite spin. Just terrible and dishonest. Glad Dan covers this and gives more Cowdery context. Exactly. Yeah, this is advanced Sunday school 699, not Sunday school 101 you get in church. So
Albert Cowdery brings this up in front of everybody in Missouri, right? And especially Thomas Marsh. And so he brings it up, and then Joseph Smith says, well, I never confessed to you that
a technicality.
I committed adultery, right? And Cowdery,
you never heard me confess that I committed adultery, did you?
Right.
And so Cowdery had to answer honestly, no.
And the reason why that's so meaningful is because back in Kirtland, and they had different inter-conflict in the church among the leadership. They vowed with each other that they would never accept any rumors about each other until the other person had confirmed it, and they wouldn't believe it until and they would only get the information from that person, never by rumor. So he's trying to tell Cowdery that we all took an oath to that, and now I never confessed to you, right? It doesn't mean he didn't have an affair with Fanny Alger, or Alger, right, as the family pronounces it, I hear. So anyway, that's the Fanny Alger deal. It's very real.
And the reason this is important too, and later on, as Joseph Smith learns how to manipulate his power from charisma to office, etc., he also learns how to manipulate. See if this sounds familiar to you, folks. Joseph Smith got really good at manipulating the meaning of words, because he, on a technicality, I mean, this is very farms technique stuff, the old farms. On a technicality, Joseph Smith was correct, and Oliver Cowdery had to agree with him. Have I ever confessed to you to adultery? And once Cowdery said no, that was the end of the discussion. You notice how he sneakily gets past ever being accused of adultery. It's so fascinating because he does this more and more and more, and most especially in the 1840s in Nauvoo, especially with polygamy. Joseph Smith becomes a master of manipulating the meanings of words. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So thank you for this wonderful context with Oliver Cowdery, because we just don't get the and what did Joseph Smith do after Oliver Cowdery described this dirty, nasty, little filthy affair? He accused Oliver Cowdery of adultery.
One part I forgot was that after Oliver Cowdery announced the angelic ordination in September 1834, in a letter that was mailed to the Missouri Church to W.W. Phelps. So the Missouri Church is the one that's faltering. So they tell them there was angelic ordinations. This is like a surprise. Like, what? We never heard this before. Well, I argue that they're telling the Missouri Church about this ordination because they're saying they're creating this chain of ordinations, and it's harder for them to break away. Well, so, and then the following December 5th is where Cowdery's elevated to be co-president, surpassing Sidney Rigdon. And then Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery worked together closely. And Oliver Cowdery is the one who, in 1835, enters into the Patriarchal Blessing book, the account of the John the Baptist and Peter, James, and John. You know, and that's like in September 1835, about the time the Doctrine and Covenants is released for publication, with all the changes in it that mention Peter, James, and John the Baptist. Well, so I believe that Oliver Cowdery, that was the bargaining going on,
right?
For Cowdery to go along with this plan. Well, so
it'll elevate Cowdery it'll elevate you, Oliver, if you don't try to overthrow me. Yeah, because without me, you ain't spit. But I need you to be a good witness, and believe me, you'll get your reward. I'm going to make you second in command. I mean, what other choice did he have? So he's supporting Joseph Smith at this point. Is what?
Well, I think Cowdery wants it because he wants to save the church. He believes in the project.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And Joseph Smith's too erratic, and he's going to run it into the ditch. Well,
all right. So routinization.
So more on Max Weber in routinization. To prevent dissolution, splintering, or collapse, Weber observed that authority becomes less charismatic and more routinized or institutionalized. What does that mean? Authority becomes less reliant on the personality of the leader, who must constantly prove he possesses such authority, and more dependent on authority derived from legal ordination and office within an institution that increasingly defines authority in legal, rational terms rather than charisma and visions. The goal is not to destroy charisma, but to harness its creative energy within the institution, which is maintained by hierarchies, procedures, and rules. And so that's what Joseph Smith is trying to move it to. Okay.
And this is how he does it.
How did he respond to pressure? So I'm making it personal here. He published the Revelations. He published his Revelations as a rule of faith, right? As covenants, right? Appointed himself as sole revelator for the church. Established bishop's court and high council. Stratifies authority, high priesthood, apostleship, and eventually the patriarchal priesthood. He claimed ordination by angels, legalizing authority, blamed followers for failure, and redefined Zion. Zion's not a place. It's just kind of a state of mind. It's in all the stakes of Zion, wherever they are.
That's a very interesting, subtle shift. Yeah,
it wasn't the ritual plan. Okay, so this is John Gager, professor emeritus from Princeton University. And this is an old article I like very much from the Journal of Mormon History called Early Mormonism and Early Christianity, Some Parallels and Their Consequences for the Study of New Religion. So he's going to talk about the failure of Chrism in a way. And so the inevitable fate of all millenarian movements is failure and collapse. They either, and a majority would certainly fall into this class, disintegrate and disappear when their millennial expectations remain unfulfilled, or, and I hear think, I hear think,
Of both Christianity and
and here I
Mormonism.
think, sorry, and here I
It's all
think,
good.
both Christianity and Mormonism, they cease to be millenarian in the strict sense. Those movements which survive the trauma of non-fulfillment usually do so in rather predictable ways. So on the next slide, we have those ways. So one, they generate a series of rational explanations for the non-arrival of the millennium. Two, they reach out and seek to persuade others of the truth of their religion, and they start focusing on missionary work. And here you might think of after receiving the power from on high in the temple dedication in 1836, they
Yeah, and
they sent
after
the
the
missionaries
debacle.
out to the world. So they got this
Yeah.
charismatic endowment. Well, the temple is really symbolic because you have the tiers on both sides of the Aaronic and Melchizedek priesthood, right? So it shows the hierarchy structure right there in the building, built into the building. But then they have this Pentecostal charismatic experience, right? And it's, it's not, everybody doesn't have the same experience. It's this guy, that guy. One guy sees an angel and another guy doesn't. So, um, but you can see they have the spirit within the structure, the hierarchical structure, so it's safe. Okay.
And that supports the group cohesion within a church under the leader.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Everybody knows who the leader is. He's up on the top tier. Right. And so then they send out missionaries from there after they got this power from on high. Well, 1831 was power from on high. The high priesthood was a spiritual experience, right?
Yeah.
And,
What about that?
well, that was before they came to Ohio. The Revelation, D&C 38, right, says, I will go to the Ohio. There I will endow you with power from on high. And the fulfillment of that was the high priesthood, supposedly. And then there was the other endowment, the power from on high became the priesthood meetings, actually, in association with the dedication of the Kirtland Temple in April 1836. So so that's the power from on high and the sending out. So they get distracted by the non-fulfillment of the millennium by focusing on building the kingdom and things that must be done before Jesus comes. They start focusing on those instead of thinking, oh, it's imminent. The end's coming. The Holocaust is going to just destroy everything. We need to go to Zion and be safe, right? So they can't do that, so you distract the situation by focusing on missionary, giving excuses of why it can't be now, that we have to fulfill other prophecies first. It's the third, they redirect their energies away from preparing for the end and towards the development of institutional structures, which that's what Joe Smith did.
Temples everywhere.
Temples, priesthood, committees.
Churches, yeah. Different gatherings in different cities now. Interesting.
Yeah, well, and also with the failure of Charisma in 1834, Zion's camp, as soon as Joe Smith gets home, he starts organizing the quorum of the 12 apostles after 5 years of not having this quorum.
Nothing. Yeah.
It
All of a
was
sudden, they are essential. Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
the Whitmers and Cowdery didn't want a hierarchical government. They wanted a more egalitarian, presbyterial kind of government, church government. So, so the failure of charisma happens in the Zionist camp, and then right away he starts building this elaborate hierarchy of apostles and 70s patriarchs, and so that was to share charisma, and that is his genius, because that made them tied to the institution just as much as he was.
There you go. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Give them the reward of not only priesthood and power from on high, but office and authority over others. Yeah. You're in the big boys club now. Yeah.
Well, they benefited greatly from this
a great psychology to share. Yeah.
Right. So that's exactly what Weber talks about, is this institution takes the place of this one person's charisma, as an essential part of the reorientation, they either forget or suppress the memory of their millenarian origins, for it is precisely in the transformation of millennial energies into other forms of action that we can locate the key to survival and success on one hand, or disintegration and collapse on the other. So it's a matter of survival, this movement. So you're either going to break into this babel of charismatics competing.
That just scatters into four winds.
Yeah.
And there is much more power in a unified group.
Well, you have to work if you're going to survive. So it's inevitable. It's just like early Christianity was very charismatic in the origins, but it eventually institutionalized and perpetuated itself.
Yeah, you can actually see that powerfully in the writings of Paul comparing to the Gospels. That's it's remarkable.
So what happens if you have charisma resting in one person and that person dies? Then what?
Yeah.
So what kept Mormonism alive was that it had hierarchy, and the apostles won out among the other, whether it was the first council or the presidency, Signoridin should succeed or whatever. The dispute was over authority, who had the proper authority, who was in the right office.
Right.
It wasn't over. Right. I have more revelations than you do, so I'm the leader.
No.
So that's how
Lee Mortensen has actually an interesting point here. Make everyone around you as guilty as you are, then give them gifts of land. That's what he did in Nauvoo with polygamy and all that jazz. But we're a little before that. But in a way, that is what happens. Is as Joseph Smith gives me the impression that the people. And they do speak this way today, some of them. Some of the YouTubers are saying this about the importance of the innovations of Joseph Smith helped show us he's a true prophet, as if innovation is the key. I would propose that would be more in line with the charismatic function as opposed to because there's very, very, very precious little innovation in the church today. If you haven't watched the last 60 years of conference, other than say 1978, and even that was from outside pressure, blacks getting the priesthood, they have been saying the same damn thing my entire life.
Charismatic origins of whatever group it's a revolutionary force. It's an erratic, irrational force. And in order to survive, it has to institutionalize, and institutions by nature are self-preserving. So, and
very good.
They're conservative and self-preserving by nature. And then people get tired of that and they want some more charisma. They want to overturn that, right? Yeah. So
There's no end to it. Yeah, I wanted to share LDS discussions. This is Mike, one of my heroes. Yeah, one of my heroes on Mormon stories, John Glenn.
He does a great
I want
job.
you on my program too, Mike. Someday
Yeah.
I've got to get a hold of you. I've been putting it off. I apologize, but it's like a Shark Tank when the sharks tell people who run the entire company they're ultimately a liability because if they die, the company dies. Yeah, that's a very good point, Mike. He's always so insightful. I've always appreciated that in him.
Oh, he's doing a fabulous job over there.
Oh, he really is.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that series. So
yeah, so I recommend that if you want to know the deep dives on all he's taking from the origin right on up. He's going kind of
from the treasure seeking on up, and they do build up on each other as they've said. But
so
here's the truth.
If that's your name. So truth claims, can scholars talk about truth claims? There's the academy, which is the professional study of religion. They shy away from speaking of truth claims. And actually, should a biographer of Joseph Smith talk about truth claims, or should you just describe things and become a narrator, and just regurgitate Joseph Smith's story? And of course, scholars cannot answer the questions such as, was Joseph Smith a true prophet? Is the Book of Mormon inspired? So that's outside the realm of scholarship. What we should be asking, though, in my opinion, is the Book of Mormon ancient? Was it written, or when was it written? Is it ancient or modern? And by whom? Is it these Mormon or Joseph Smith? That kind of a thing. And I would maintain that scholars routinely make conclusions about the authenticity of texts, such as authorship, date, place, and sometimes conclude that a text is a forgery or pseudepigraphic. So it's well within the realm of scholarship to talk about the Book of Mormon and is it historical. Now, next slide, we'll just kind of look at a couple of, scholars. Here's Bart Ehrman's books, Forged, and
two of his very best.
Forgery and counter forgery, in the New Testament. Some books.
And Mormonish did a podcast with me here a month ago or so, where they mentioned that this theme of forgers and counter forgers, etc., was played out throughout the early church. Everyone was accusing everyone else of doing this. So the interesting thing is, it wasn't just in Mormonism. This goes way, way back. But Mormonism is not exempt from it. So, well, you got Mark Hoffman, and then the church buys it, stuff like that. So
but when we talk about parts of the New Testament or Old Testament that are not letters of Paul, but when we study them and we determine they're not written by Paul. What does that tell you? It tells you something about the church, what the church wanted to, or there was a dispute. There wasn't enough authority for a certain idea, and they kind of smuggled it into the community by forging, out and out forging, or they write pseudepigraphic books written by Isaiah or Moses or Enoch, to try to introduce concepts or ideas into the church that would not normally be accepted unless it was by an authority figure. Okay, so scholars do that. They take texts, they judge whether they're ancient or modern or when they were written. They read the text carefully and try to determine these things. So we're well within our rights to do that with the Book of Mormon. Okay, we can't shy away from that because the answer to that changes everything.
Yeah.
So
Mike says something else really good too. This is a distinction that is so important. You have to make apologists answer claims made by the text itself, ancient/historical, and not allow them to move into the divine, which is unfalsifiable. That
Right.
is a very important, and in fact, even the caliber of Richard Bushman has now said that the Book of Abraham is pseudepigrapha. Now that's huge. That's a huge development. And he's a
Yeah.
patriarch in the church. So, I mean, that, so thank you, Mike. Again, another great insight and idea. Yeah. Very good. So keep going. Yep.
Yep. Next slide. So if a historian determines the Book of Mormon is not history, which is presently the more probable Bayesian conclusion, then then there were no Nephites who wrote on gold plates or buried them. Therefore, a Nephite angel did not appear to Joseph Smith, and the text he dictated came out of his own mind, inspired or no. And the object people felt through a cloth or hefted in a box was fake. And the three witnesses must have hallucinated. And the testimony of 8 witnesses must be explained some other way because they couldn't have handled ancient gold plates.
So this is a big side that in determining the Book of Mormon is not history. Now let's see what happens.
Yeah.
So, you were going to lead into this, weren't you?
No, you're okay. You're okay. I just
this is the part. This is the part where, on this aspect. This is, and I'm not going to try to steal your thunder. Well, so I won't. Shut up, Carrie. Yeah.
I was just going to say in transition to this that people that debunk. There's some people want to just debunk Mormonism, and that's okay. But scholars, biographers, historians are not debunkers. They're not simple debunkers. This is for a biographer like me. This is where the story begins. Okay. So now that we've reached this, so the Book of Mormon is not history. So now what? What does it mean? Okay.
Yeah. What is the implication of that?
Yeah. Why did he do it?
Why is that even a big deal? Why do we even go this direction?
Yeah. Well,
when Joseph Smith told us it's the most correct book on the face of the earth, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You want me to put the slide up now?
Yeah.
I just didn't want people to be reading the slide. I wanted them to listen to you because your point here is one of the other pillars of Vogel. I'm going to call them pillars of Vogel in this book. And this is just in the introduction. But this, for me personally, was the most eye-opening part of his book. And I know it's because I'm an odd duck, but here's why. When Dan wrote his it's upstairs again. Sorry. When you wrote your article and you mentioned that in your book in the Prophet Puzzle, Joseph Smith, the Prophet Puzzle, on Joseph Smith being a pious fraud, I personally could not wrap my mind around what you were saying at that point. I was in apologetic mode. Now, what is really interesting is Dan Peterson cackled with glee and they mocked you behind the scenes like nobody's business. And I couldn't even grasp the points they were making in some respects. Okay. So this has been a muddy issue for me. I guess this is why I laud this book for you, because here is where the scales fell off my eyes and I saw clarity for the first time. And I see your logic. I see your point. And what's most astonishing for me personally, now I haven't been in apologetics for quite a while, you guys, if you didn't notice. For the first time, I've got clarity and I see how this is actually one of the most reasonable approaches to the fact that, remember that list, you guys, this is a really, really important list. If the Book of Mormon is not history, then what? It means there's no Nephites, no angel. He made it up. The plates were fake, etc. Well, for Pete's sake, what's left then? Because remember, Vogel is saying, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Dan, but Vogel is saying we've got to get past this Joseph Smith's a charlatan or Joseph Smith's pure prophet. The dichotomy there, they're both an extreme on opposite sides, and it doesn't really help us understand Joseph Smith as well as we could. And the manner to come to that understanding is through Dan's Pious Fraud. Why, though, a pious fraud? That seems like a complete contradiction. I love Vogel's explanation, and here I'll let you take it back. Well, I just wanted to emphasize this is one of the best parts.
Yes, thank you. The scholars cannot ask the question, is the Book of Mormon inspired? So I'd like to change. I can hear myself echoing now. I'd like to change the question.
I don't hear you echoing.
Well, that's good. Okay, I'll keep talking then. I'd like to change the question to, did Joseph Smith think he was inspired? So scholars can answer that question better than whether it's really inspired by God. And so we have to figure out whether there's a God or not, and whether he inspires people, and Joseph Smith specifically. That's a very difficult question to try to answer. But an easier question would be, did Joseph Smith think?
They're saying you are echoing, Dan. Can you sit back just a little bit?
Sit back? Is this better?
Just a little bit further away. I'm going to put my headphones back on and see if that helps the echo.
Here, hang on.
I turned my mic off and turned it back on, so let's try this.
Okay. I don't.
Wouldn't you know it? It's in the best part, and that
I don't hear myself echoing now. Okay, so did Joseph Smith think he was inspired? Did like DNC 9 says, did he work it out in his mind and pray about it and get what he thinks is a spiritual confirmation? And that's how he really wrote the Book of Mormon, not by reading some text on a stone in a hat. That was all to increase faith. Okay, that was all part of his shtick, So then we'll move on to some of the texts that I find quite interesting in light of this Pious Fraud theory.
You gave me a new understanding of the Book of Mormon with this like I've never had. That's why I loved it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I love it. So Moroni quotes God as saying, okay, so we're going to work on first, before we get to the Pious Fraud evidences, is what would be Joseph Smith's definition of revelation? Like DNC 9 is what I think a good clue. And what is his definition of truth? Okay. And Moroni quotes God, supposedly, as saying, because of my spirit, he that believeth shall know these things are true. For it persuadeth men to do good, and whatsoever persuadeth men to do good is of me. For good cometh of none, save it be of me. I am the same that leadeth men to all good. So, if the Book of Mormon is good and persuades people to tries to persuade people to do good, then it's sent by God. It's inspired by God, in other words. So in another interesting quote, and that comes from Ether, Book of Ether 4:11 through 12, Moroni 7:16. This is the same chapter where you're supposed to pray it and ask God if it's true or not. Mormon reasoned in this book, I show unto you the way to judge, for everything which inviteth to do good and to persuade to believe in Christ is sent forth by the power and gift of Christ. Wherefore ye may know with a perfect knowledge it is of God. So this is Joseph Smith's definition of truth and inspiration. And so if the Book of Mormon is not history, and Joseph Smith wrote it by revelation, it is still true.
This is the point that's just so amazing.
Yeah, by his definition.
Yeah.
So I asked myself, would a pious fraud write, or ordinary fraud, let's say a straight up just fraud guy that wants money, power, and sex, would he be writing like this? Would these ideas even occur to such a person? I don't think so. Hereby know ye the Spirit of God. Okay, I'm quoting out of the New Testament right now. 1 John 4:2, which might be the inspiration for these statements here. Hereby know ye the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesseth that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of God. There you are. So
there you have it.
So then we'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, now you back up a little bit and review this God's use of eternal punishment. That's awesome.
No, I think
and then this will lead us right to the pious fraud idea.
Skipped one.
What?
You skipped one.
No, that
go backwards. Okay, but we must be missing one that is.
We had
15.
troubles.
It's labeled 15 if you see those, but I'll read it. Do you believe?
Sorry, yeah.
Do you believe Joseph Smith Jr. to be a prophet? Okay,
yeah.
He was asked that question.
I don't have that one. That one was doubled when you sent it to me, and it wouldn't load. Darn it! Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, go ahead and read it.
So Joseph Smith answered, yes, and every man who has the testimony of Jesus. He then quoted Revelations 19:10, which says, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And so his answer was that, yes, he's a prophet, and so does everyone who has the testimony of Jesus. So he believes he has the testimony of Jesus. He was born again, and that makes him a prophet. So by his definition, he's a prophet. Now we'll go to the pious fraud. This is what I call the philosophy and rationalization of a pious deceiver. And so this is his personal philosophy. His rationalizations, I believe, for concluding that he would convert people to Jesus in this manner. Seeping through in his own writings. So the revelation of March 1830.
Notice the date. This is early. This is very, very early.
It's actually March, the same month that the Book of Mormon came off the press, that talked about it has a lot of anti-universalism in it. But this revelation says, the revelation itself says to keep it secret. This is meat, and those who need milk cannot eat the meat. So keep this secret. Do not publish it to the world. And it was given to Martin Harris, who had a leanings towards universal salvation. And maybe he was wondering about, well, the Book of Mormon's anti-universalist. I don't understand what's going on. So this revelation was designed to explain to Martin Harris, among other things, it commanded him to sell his farm and pay for the publication of the Book of Mormon. But it told him that even though the Book of Mormon and scriptures use the terms like eternal punishment, it's not eternal. eternal is really a synonym for God. So it's really God's punishment. It doesn't mean that it shall last forever. And that's what it says. But it is more expressed in other scriptures, and God uses this misleading language, even though it's untrue, that it might work upon the hearts of the children to men altogether for my name's glory. So this revelation is explaining that God sometimes directs his own children for their own good. In other words, there are some lies that produce more good than bad. The ends justifies the means, kind of a thing. The Book of Mormon in June 1829, just dictating this in Fayette, the Spirit commands Nephi to murder Laban and says, "It is better that one man should perish than a nation should dwindle and perish in unbelief." So Nephi hesitates to murder Laban, the defenseless, drunken Laban, and the Spirit commands him to do it and gives this reason. So Nephi is being urged to cross moral lines to produce a greater good. That it means the salvation of so many people. So the similar reasoning I would suggest is going on in Joseph Smith's
This
mind.
is situational ethics.
Yeah, that Joseph Smith is saying, if I use this deception, more people will be converted.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, and if it persuades you to believe in God, since I am the giver of good, it's good. It doesn't matter how you persuade them. Just get them to believe in God. Hence, a pious fraud. That's powerful to me, man. That opens up the whole world to me to, well, now I grasp Joseph Smith a whole lot better. Truly.
Well, you see him as a more complex person that
Absolutely.
wrestled inwardly.
Back and forth. Yeah. There's
whether he should
yeah,
do
there
this
is.
or shouldn't he do
There's
this.
a tension. Yeah.
And he worked this out in his mind. It will produce more good. It's a good thing, so God approves of it. And then when miracles happen, when people are being converted, it justifies his decision.
Right.
So
yeah, and another thing you said in the book that you didn't put it here that really struck me is if Joseph Smith really did, if he knew in his heart that he really was persuaded and he did believe in Christ, then he's not going to be punished eternally for being deceptive and faking people out, even with something so important as the gold plates and the reality of Nephi. Okay, yeah, I made all that stupid shit up, but it's okay because you do now believe in Christ and you've repented of your sins. Well, I'm not going to be punished either forever. It's all good. It's going to work.
So
I don't know about you guys, but that is eye-opening to me. I never looked at Joseph Smith that way before, so this is huge. So very cool. It made the rest of your book really enjoyable because I felt I had a new insight on Joseph Smith. So now let's see how you put the history, not the thing you do in your book. Yes, it's a dry history book, but it's not. And here's why. Because Dan is also explaining the consequences of the experiences, of the words, the failed prophecies, the fights, the arguments, as well as the good things they did together, and so on and so forth. So I'm really glad you put this in the introduction, not later on in the text, say like chapter 2. So anyway.
Well, yeah, I kind of see the introduction as a little separate essay, sort of like I did.
It was. Yes. Yeah.
Biography, where I talk about I was developing some of the ideas of Pious Fraud and other things comparing Joseph Smith to psychics and magicians, and I was providing a larger context. But the book itself doesn't harp on the pious fraud throughout. It's that
no, it doesn't. No, it really doesn't. Yeah,
you'll understand why I just let his religiosity show without trying to water it down or explain it away. That, if you see him like Brody did it, let's say that he was irreligious, just a deceiver,
right.
after power, and
that
whatever.
Doesn't make sense. That doesn't make as much sense. I'll put it that way. And
every time he shows any religious qualities, it's all pretense. You have to kind of read his mind and say, oh, he's just acting. It's just an act. He's not sincere, and all that. So you'd have to constantly be trying to explain away any show of religion. When I give this context, I don't have to do that. I can accept that he's religious. And I don't know about you,
yes,
but I know a lot of religious people who are hypocritical.
That's unfortunate, but true. Hey, I was too, and I probably still am in many respects. So
yeah,
part of the human condition.
That is it. So I don't feel a need to try to. I don't need a pure prophet to think that he believes himself to be a prophet. I don't
or
need
a total charlatan.
I don't need to buy into all the miracles either to believe that he believed he was a prophet.
Right.
At least, So I don't have to answer the ultimate question either of was he a real prophet?
Right.
So it's unanswerable.
See, so, okay, now, okay, hold it down, hold it down. You just made a very fabulous point.
Oh, go ahead.
The church does need Joseph Smith to be a prophet, and that's why they've manipulated the history into a faith-promoting narrative. This is the essential difference between the Saints book, the new narrative history, and Dan's book, is because Dan doesn't need him to be that. The question is, why is Joseph Smith doing this? Does it make sense if he was a true prophet? No, it doesn't. Does it make sense if he was a complete charlatan? No, it doesn't, even though many times that makes better sense. But he did a lot of good. There's no question about that. But he did a lot of deceiving. And there's no question about that too. So it's not an either or, it's a little of both. But it appears to me like we can approach this more objectively, if I can use that word, simply because we don't have to have the end be a certain way. Let's just see what happens. Yeah. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that was a great point you made, because that again is one of the strong points of your
so go back one
text. It's the same thing.
Oh, right? Same. We're missing. Okay, so the part that's missing.
I'm sorry.
The Book of Abraham, March 1842.
Oh,
instead of Abraham telling his wife to lie to the Egyptians about their marital status, Smith has God instructs Abraham to tell Sarah to lie. So he has sanctioning lying, and he changed Genesis to do it. He changed it.
And the apologetic spin on that is hilarious.
Yeah.
But we don't have to do that. We don't have to worry about putting spin on it. Let's just understand the text.
Yeah. So Abraham's not to blame. He was commanded by God.
Yeah.
So there is that problem. Tradition.
And it was okay for God to tell.
Yeah.
It was okay for God to tell Abraham to lie, because Abraham was going to become a father of many nations. So it's okay to lie to one man that the rest of the nations may get the truth.
A greater good. He got
divine. Yeah.
he got a divine dispensation to lie. So
there you go.
there is that problem in the Bible. The history of the Bible goes way back to people struggling over this. When Abraham lied, to Pharaoh, about his wife's status and that they weren't married.
Joseph Smith solved it. He said God told him to.
Right. So
it's that simple.
You're right. Then I have one more, which is everybody's familiar with this. The letter to Nancy Rigdon in 1842, where Joseph Smith
the happiness letter.
And it was Joseph Smith. There's no doubt about it. Nobody writes like this. That which is wrong under one circumstance may be and often is right under another. Whatever God requires is right, no matter what it is, although we may not see the reason thereof till long after the events transpire. Even things which may be considered abominable to all those who are not do not understand the order of heaven. So what we have there is very, very clear is what Mike Quinn used to call the kingdom of God ethics or theological ethics or
now understand this Nancy Rigdon letter was polygamy, and he was trying to talk her into being his wife, and this is the young daughter, the teenage daughter of Sidney Rigdon that he wrote this to, because Nancy Rigdon took no guff from any authority figure. I don't care if God cooks you dinner, Joseph. You can go kiss my grits. You're not gonna marry me. I'm not gonna marry you. The answer is stick it, chump. And he tried and tried and tried to, and this caused a huge rift between Joseph and Sidney. I mean, this caused gossip, you guys.
Yeah, so
counties away, man.
Go along with it.
Yeah,
but
But so Joseph is trying to persuade her, and the way he does it is he says, "Hey, anything God says is right. Just do it." Fascinating.
So now you froze up. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, there's the professor. So
did I freeze up just now?
Yes, and disappeared. Okay, we're back now. The happiness letter was inserted in the history of the church. It was written down by Thomas Bullock, and it was inserted in the history of the church after they got to Utah, when polygamy was in the open. Okay, so they inserted that letter.
Yeah.
And they knew it was written by Joseph Smith, even though, it was claimed that it was, and it was kind of denied. It was denied in Nauvoo. No wonder they denied it. They denied everything
in Nauvoo,
and it published, about polygamy.
Nauvoo in Hebrew means city of denials. Oh,
yeah,
I'm kidding.
So then we go to my closing statement for the Pious Fraud, which is out of my article, my 1998 article. It's been a long time.
A fabulous article.
We may never know exactly Smith's reasoning, but we can at least say that if he wrote the Book of Mormon, became a prophet, and founded the church as a pious deception, it is evident that he had the psychological means of justifying such acts. So that's my conclusion. Now we get to the fun part. This is the symbiosis of charisma. So I'm glad to see you got it there. So this is Max Weber's original statement on this matter. The holder of charisma seizes the task and demands obedience and a following by virtue of his mission. And the mission is Zion, right? And everybody's afraid of the end of the world. And so that's his mission. His success determines whether he finds them. His charismatic claim breaks down if his mission is not recognized by those to whom he feels he has been sent. If they recognize him,
back up just a little.
Yeah.
Back up just a little from your mic. You're
Oh.
popping really hard, and it's
Oh, sorry,
causing the
everybody.
mic to.
Thank
No, it's all good. It's all
you.
good. Carry on,
Okay.
or I mean, Dan on.
I thought they wanted me to be close
Sorry.
to the mic. Okay, if they
I know,
recognize.
but not that close. We don't want to eat the mic.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
Um,
I'm
if
having
they
fun. I
recognize
love having
him,
you here.
All right. If they recognize him, he is their master so long as he knows how to maintain recognition through proving himself, renewing the charisma. But he does not derive his right from their will in the manner of an election. Rather, the reverse holds. It is the duty of those to whom he addresses his mission to recognize him as their charismatically qualified leader. And that kind of sums up what happened with Joseph Smith and charismatic leaders in general. We're going to get
Hey, C. Wheeler. Sorry, I'm going to do a shout out to C.
Yeah,
Wheeler.
go ahead.
He became a YouTube member, a new member. Welcome, my friend.
What? Oh.
Good deal. Welcome to one of the best podcasts you will ever hear on this channel, other than all of my other ones as well. Boy, that's bias, isn't it? So anyway, I just had to say shout out to him. Awesome. Okay, keep going.
So there's kind of a symbiosis. The leader has a more authoritative, and they are authoritative, stance, and they have to recognize him. He isn't going to really conform to them. Okay, so, and his mission, we're going to talk about here in just a moment, of what is Joseph Smith's mission and why he had such success in attracting people. What was so attractive about Joseph Smith and his mission, and how did
what was so attractive?
want to build this Zionic city, So go to the next one. Sociologist Kasiro
There we go.
Miyahara.
I pronounce that Miyahara. I might be wrong, but I think it's Miyahara.
Right.
Miyahara. I don't know. Landon's in Japan. He would know how it's pronounced better than I would.
Oh, but yeah, the RFM.
Yeah, RFM knows everything.
Yeah.
Except how to draw caricatures. Oh, I've got him on that one. I'm just
okay.
saying.
So let's see what this charisma from Weber to contemporary sociology. That's sociological inquiry in 1983. So he says the charisma of a leader is the product of the followers. It is essentially an illusion. The actual personality of the leader has little to do with charisma. This assertion does not deny the existence of remarkably innovative individuals. Rather, the point is that the innovativeness of an individual as such is just one of many factors that facilitate the imputation of charisma from the audience. The charisma of a leader may be considered a social phenomenon in which people, that is followers, impute a superior quality to a leader, although it is apprehended by the followers as a gift of grace, i.e., something that is coming from superhuman sources. Yet, obviously, the extraordinary quality of the leader remains, in actuality, the produce of the followers' perception that there exists a certain alien power behind the leader expressed words and deeds.
I knew it. God is an alien, man. Moroni's shaft of light was a beam me down Scotty moment from the Starship Enterprise. I knew it, man. The conspiracists are right.
Oh, conspiracy. We'll be talking about that in a moment.
Sorry, it says alien powers.
I like that quote.
Yeah, that's important.
There's another one by Anthony J. Blassie, who similarly observed the individual who has and this is a very interesting point, pertains to us now, okay? The individual who has a charisma is not only a person, but a personage, a public character in a public drama who receives and imparts legitimacy. That public drama is a process rather than an entity. It not only takes a processual form, such as narrative, lending itself to reenactment, imitation, and recitation, but also is a process in the sense of itself having to be constituted and reconstituted in history. And that's what we do. That's what we're doing right now. Okay. And I hope my book plays a part in that.
It will. It is. It will. Yep. Absolutely.
If a given personage's charisma has survived over an extended period of time, it has probably done so by changing with the times. The changes in question do not imply that the individual has shifted with every fashion. I almost said wind of doctrine, every fashion, but the public has remade its
Well,
impression
that would
of
fit.
the personage several times. So Joe Smith gets remade. I mean, you've seen the Surfer Joe, right? And he gets his looks in the art by the artist's conceptions. You can trace it, and it keeps changing. But
Yeah.
so he gets remade and remade, and that's how he survives. If he can't be remade, stale and old, and yeah.
Yeah, you become. Hey, did you know for the first time in the history of the church that the entire first presidency is over 90 years old altogether? Their combined age is a longer time, is a bigger number than from Joseph Smith to us. Dang near 270. Nelson's 99. I don't know how old Oaks is. 95 and plus his nose. Irene just turned 90, so that's
You might want to from
209.
your microphone.
Huh?
Well, your microphone's breaking you up.
Uh-oh.
There's static. Now there's a bar.
You're frozen now. What's going on?
Can you see me? Okay. I'm moving. It's the aliens, yes.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay.
But we're connected in a different way. Anyway, shall we carry on?
Yes, sir. I'm getting rid of my mic. Okay.
Okay.
Have at it.
So, next one, Joseph Smith's mission. What is Joseph Smith's mission? Thank you.
Yeah, very excited about this book.
Salute.
Yep. Where can we buy Dan's book? Where can we buy your book?
Amazon.com.
Amazon's a good place.
That's where I get all my books.
That's where I got mine. You did not. You wrote the thing. Oh. All right.
So, okay, let's change the slide.
Okay, here we
Joseph
go.
Smith's mission. Do you recognize?
Here's the big picture.
Do you recognize that picture there?
Oh boy, don't I though.
Those are that's the plat of the city of Zion.
Yeah, yeah.
June 1833, 1 month before the press is destroyed and the partridge is tarred and feathered. And so, and the church in Kirtland, they're oblivious, despite Joseph Smith's prophetic gift, to what's going on in Missouri, and they're making plans of building a big city. Here's the plan, and you'll see the next slide. We'll have the plan of the temple that they want to be built there. It's totally unrealistic, though. It's totally unrealistic. I mean, that plat is a mile square, and you're supposed to add another mile square until you fill up the whole world, that Joseph Smith said. Well, that plat ignores not only the terrain, but ignores the streets, the buildings that are already there, the people that are already living there.
Yeah.
It's like they don't even care about the Gentiles at all.
No.
Living there. The plan is not to take them into consideration whatsoever. And the thing is that then that's where Joseph Smith made his mistake, and because he made a specific location by revelation where the temple is supposed to be built, that you cannot modify that very easily. So if the people there have different idea, and they kick you out, and your revelation says that it has to be there. I mean, he would have been better off if he said, just build a stake of Zion wherever you want, just do it.
That's what they're doing now. That's why they can build so blasted many temples.
Yeah. But once Joseph Smith named a spot by revelation, he was tied into that. And that, I believe, was a fatal mistake.
Yeah.
And when the Gentiles, they burned down the press, they tarred and feathered Partridge, and they made them sign this document saying that they will leave within a certain amount of time. And they signed it eventually, but they had no plans of ever obeying that agreement. And they went on planning. Even Joseph Smith back in Ohio, even though he knew about the agreement, eventually ignored it. They just kept on planning. They had no plans.
They say he was a great city planner.
They had no
the most important city in the whole universe, the New Jerusalem, and he does this with it. Boy.
So his mission was to convert the Indian Israelites en masse, establish the city of the New Jerusalem or Zion as a refuge to escape the coming Holocaust that will sweep the wicked from the earth. Didn't happen. Neither one of those happened. Construct a temple, didn't happen. Prepare for Christ's second coming by building a utopian society, the all things in common kind of thing.
And neither one of them happened.
And that never happened, and it was a disaster. And
boy.
So in June 1833.
Okay, am I going too soon? Is this the right one? Yes, the next one.
Yeah. Well, we're missing one, I think.
Uh-oh. Again? Boy.
Yeah. Okay, we're missing one, and that one was a picture of the plan of the temple that was supposed to be built in Jackson County, Missouri. So I'm showing you that they're planning it back in Kirtland, and that Zion wasn't something of the dissipated into nothingness of the future.
Right.
It to happen right then. They were making the plans. The plans were inspired by God.
And it was for their generation, and they defined that generation as us. While we're alive, we aren't dying before it happens. So, I said that in my previous. Don't give me that bullshit. Hebrew and Greek generation can mean 1,000 years. These guys described what they meant by generation.
Well, they laid the foundation.
Yes,
the cornerstone of the temple,
and it was prophesied they would be there when Christ comes. It's amazing.
They were ready to go. That was the whole. The Book of Mormon came forth, and right away.
Yep.
The Book of Mormon came forth in March.
That's huge, and the reason we're emphasizing that is because the church downplays this like crazy. They completely reinterpret.
That's one of the things is that they have to lose that memory.
Yes, they have to lose that memory. That's why I said in my video on the review of this fabulous book, the church today it's not Joseph Smith's vision, you guys. It's really not. So
no.
Anyway.
It was a quote. You can take that off the screen for a second. It was a quote next to the plans of the temple. And it said, this is Joseph Smith in 1834, April 1834, said, take away the Book of Mormon and the Revelations, and where is our religion? We have none. For without Zion and the place of deliverance, we must fall. For God will gather out his saints from the Gentiles, and then comes desolation or destruction, and none can escape except the pure in heart who are gathered to Zion.
Yeah.
So that was the plan.
Yeah, and notice Joseph Smith's emphasis. This is him giving them incentive, like you said in your book, but the emphasis is if we don't do this, we must fall.
Yeah.
That's it. There is no other option. You're building this city, and we're putting that temple where I told you through Jesus Christ where to put that temple, or it's over. We're done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
that was his mission. And
that was his mission.
So
yeah.
Why did people believe in this mission? Let's run off to some utopian, build up a city. Jesus is coming anytime. So did the people recognize Joseph Smith and his message? Why did they recognize the message and become obedient to him? Okay, so
yeah.
what was the situation at the time the Book of Mormon appeared? Well, here we go. Andrew Jackson.
Here we go.
When the Book of Mormon came off the press in March 1830, it not only described the entire destruction of two ancient American civilizations by secret combinations, but contained the ominous and foreboding predictions concerning latter-day America's own national calamity. By the time he finished dictating his history of ancient America in late June 1829, General Andrew Jackson, hero of the War of 1812 from Tennessee, had been elected president and had occupied the office for less than 2 months. Inaugurations were not in January.
Yeah,
in case
definitely
you
different.
Figure out the math on that. Masonry and Jackson's election in 1829 was the deep state conspiracy of Joseph Smith's day. Okay.
And it was, yeah.
Well, the majority of people just rolled their eyes at this anti-Masonry stuff. There was a significant minority of people that took it seriously and were, shaking in their boots.
Yeah.
Joseph Smith tapped into the prevailing fear of the religious or some religious conservatives. Charismatic leaders and apocalyptic prophets are revolutionary. They appear at times of social unrest and period of change and transition. The prophets in the Old Testament did that, right?
Yeah.
So, with the loss of their Zion, same thing. The loss of their Zion set them into a crisis, and prophets came to explain it. Why did it happen? And some of those excuses Joseph Smith picked up on. Okay, so the Book of Mormon, Ether 8:23, right? O ye Gentiles, it is wisdom in God that these things should be shown unto you, and thereby ye may repent of your sins, and suffer not that these murderous combinations shall get above you, which are built up to get political power and economic gain, lest the work of destruction come upon you, yea, even the sword of justice of the eternal God shall fall upon you to your overthrow and destruction. Okay, so, and then Moroni says, further warned, whatsoever nation shall uphold such secret combinations to get power and gain until they shall spread over the nation, behold, they shall be destroyed. So these to the people that are anti-Jacksons and anti-Masons, they were the same. These warnings triggered them. This
it would.
meant something to them. They were already set up for this message. And so Jackson was the secret combination that got into power because he was a Mason, and there was these murders, not just William Morgan in 1826. There were other claimed Masonic murders for vengeance that had occurred, and a segment of the religious conservatives preached these things from the pulpits.
Yeah.
So one more slide. We got two slides actually, but second to the last slide, the King Andrew Jackson, right there.
There he is.
Usurp authority. He was like the fascist
You are
president.
you are almost seeing Joseph Smith in that, because just before he was martyred, they were all anointed kings. Him and Taylor and Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball, they all anointed themselves kings
Yeah, well, so
secretly in combination. And it's in one of these Joseph Smith Papers books. I'm telling you, that's not anti-Mormon gossip. It's documented. I promise. H. Michael McQuark came to my home and gave us a lecture on that. That was spectacular. Yeah, it was cool.
The Kingdom
I wish
of God.
I wish I'd recorded it. Darn it.
So Andrew Jackson was also a king, Masonic king,
Mm-hmm.
and there was fear among the anti-Masons that they would put a Masonic king in the presidency,
And they did.
And they did. And so, and it didn't amount to anything. It all blew over, just about the same as the communist scare during McCarthy's time. You know, Senator Joe McCarthy and the communists, infiltrating our government. And there was a big scare about that. But what happened? Nothing. Okay. But at the time, people were really worked up about it, but it passed. Well, the same thing with this anti-Masonry thing. It was at the peak. In 1832, the William Wirt was the first third party in America. It was called the Anti-Masonic Party. And some candidates got into office. William Wirt didn't, of course. Andrew Jackson won again. And so this also blew over. And by the time you get to Nauvoo, further, and even in 1838, 39, it's quite apparent that, and Andrew Jackson's out of office, and that.
Yeah, well, at this time they can
manage to survive.
At this time they can practice their own secret combinations in Nauvoo.
Yeah, right. Well, so some Mormons objected to the endowment as violating the Book of Mormon's prohibition against secret combinations.
Yep. Well, it was only for them. Yes, that's for everybody else, not us leaders. We're exempt. We don't have to pay taxes. We don't have to talk about the SEC issues. We're exempt from the government. So they still think that. All right.
So so the secret combinations rhetoric that figures so prominently in the Book of Mormon and some of Joseph Smith's early revelations disappears. But it does come up
like that
against some thieves, and they use that term against some thieves in Nauvoo. But this worry about national overthrow by a secret combination, it disappears. So one more quote from Moroni. Yeah, this is it. Okay. Notice that Moroni switches to the singular when talking about the secret combination of the last days. Wherefore the Lord commandeth you, when you shall see these things come among you, that ye shall awake to a sense of your awful situation because of this secret combination which shall be among you, or woe unto it because of the blood of them who have been slain. For they cry from the dust for vengeance upon it, and also upon those who build it up.
Ooh, interesting. Are you trying to tell me that you have been reading this text far more carefully than all the rest of us combined? If you're not, I am.
Well, I've read the Book of Mormon a lot. I mean,
yes, you have.
Several times before I even went on my mission. Yeah. I actually made the electronic text for the signature books it was a DVD, right?
Yeah, no
Yeah, have
kidding.
you ever used that? There, I forget what it's called right now, but way
The
back
Dan Vogel edition.
many years ago, I read the Book of Mormon and
Yeah.
made the electronic copy to match the 1830 edition.
How
so
cool. I didn't
so
know that.
I got paid for it. That was one of the things I did
Oh, well, that's just priestcraft then.
to
No
help
good. No good. Nope.
I did it
Priestcraft.
for
There's no spirit now.
the book. I made the electronic copy for the Book of Mormon, the Book of Commandments, the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants. I think I did the hymnal, all that stuff. So
Wow.
I've been around a long time.
Yes, sir. That's why we love you. You're going to be around for a long more time because you've got 10 or 15 more of these books to write.
Nauvoo next. Okay, so next slide, our last slide.
Last slide. Let's see what's up.
I hope you got it. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Joseph Smith, the failed prophet, I call this. By the authority of Jesus Christ, that not many years shall pass away before the United States shall present such a scene of bloodshed as has not a parallel in the history of our nation. Pestilence, hail, famine, and earthquake shall sweep the wicked of this generation from off the face of this land. The people of the Lord, those who have complied with the requisitions of the new covenant, have already commenced gathering together to Zion, which is in the state of Missouri. So Joe Smith was dead serious about gathering, and his prediction about gathering to Zion to escape the coming Holocaust. Yeah. But that didn't happen.
Yeah, if he would have just,
There was a Holocaust in a way. I mean, there's always, especially back then, famines and plagues.
Some of the other
Civil War,
1860. Well, and then some of the other descriptions that Joseph told others and they wrote about, they said stuff about their when we go back to Missouri, there won't be so much as a yellow dog to wag its tail or to lick the dust off your feet. It's going to be so obliterated that nothing will hinder us from just simply going in, building our city and temple, and here comes Jesus. So their expectation was such that it's going to be a cakewalk. It's going to be clear and easy. So yeah.
So I think that's where I would like to leave it for now, unless people have questions. And I appreciate their attention all this time. 2.5 hours.
We haven't been 2.5. Oh my hell, we have. Wow, Dan. See, now this is what Sunday school should be. I didn't want it. Oh, wow. All right, awesome. Do any of you have any questions? Ask it within the next couple of minutes, because I'm quite sure that you guys are ready to stand up and stretch your legs and get your blood circulating. Thank you for sticking with us. It looks like we still have 111 people. That's wonderful. We appreciate all your interest and excitement. I will say once again, I promise, if you liked this, what Dan has been elaborating on is just the introduction. You now have 830 more very interesting history pages to read. So get this book. I can't overemphasize that. I am one of the witnesses to the good, fabulous reading that this book will give you. So, and you don't have to read it in a week or 9 days like I did. I did that so I could do a book review, be one of the first to do a video book review, because of my respect for Dan Vogel as a qualified, good historian. He's a good, dear friend of mine, and he's one heck of a fabulous author, and he's not done yet. So, I mean, if it takes you a year to read an 800-page book, that's all good. This is not a time speed race, but he is in the process of writing his next book on Nauvoo, and you're going to want to have that one in your head too when start saving your money now, because unfortunately it's not because Dan's trying to rip us off that the prices are so high. It is the cost of materials and stuff. So
it's like 2 books in one.
It is. It is like two books.
Ohio and Missouri.
Ohio and Missouri. That is a good description, Dan. Thank you. Yeah, it really is. It's fantastic.
If you look at the length of the Ohio parts, it's about 600 and some odd pages,
yeah,
which is the size of the book, the companion book to Nauvoo.
Yeah.
And that's only 4 years.
And that's only 4 years. So
and that's only 4 years. So
yeah,
Ohio was like 8 years at least.
And by the way, we will also encourage you, as you can. The nice thing the Joseph Smith Papers Project has done is they've put so much on the electronic site and all that's worth looking at. But I personally like the books, and I have a few of those, and so look at it that way too. So, okay, very good. All right, Dan. Thank you once again for coming on my show. It's as always good to see you. Oh, my pleasure. I'm looking forward to having you on my show much more through the up and coming time. Hey, everybody, look for Wednesday night. Dan Vogel's on the teaching circuit. Yeah. He will be on Mormonism Live, Bill Rill and Radio Free Mormon. You don't want to miss it because he will give us some of the information in his new video on the magic parchments that Joseph Smith had and the Jupiter Talisman. I am here to tell you it is very well done. You will really enjoy it. You will really enjoy hearing Dan on Mormonism Live. So, our pleasure. Thank you, Don.
Lots of new information.
Yeah, there is a lot of new. Now, understand, new information. We're not kidding. He doesn't just regurgitate D. Michael Quinn. He responds to D. Michael Quinn, and he shows some new stuff that Quinn did not realize or got wrong. So, I mean, this is not just a regurgitation. No, this is new, good, fabulous information. So, yeah. Okay, so yes, more Dan Vogel Encore. Thank you, T.O. T.O.'s a good friend of mine, and I've had him on the show a few times. We will be on the show together some more. We're making some plans, right, T.O.? So, okay, you guys, thank you so much for all of your support and your love and your interest and your fun. Hit subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification button so that when new materials come out, you're notified for you. We will see you every Sunday night, so far as I can tell, from here until doomsday. I'm never going to quit podcasting, even though I do pick up other fun, interesting things to do with my time, such as drawing caricatures and making Exmos into superheroes. That's my new project, and I'm having a blast. We love all you guys. Appreciate y'all. Don't stay up late tonight, even though you already have. We'll catch you next time.